Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. You are not going to believe the stuff we're going to share with you here about these voting machines, electronic voting. Now, you can brush all this off as a crazy conspiracy theory, but that's my point. It's not my conspiracy theory. It's not the right's conspiracy theory. This is the left's conspiracy theory, and they've suddenly forgotten all about it, magically, all of a sudden. On Friday's show, and you can go back and you can go on our YouTube page. You can download our app for free on your smartphone and watch all of our previous shows, or our YouTube page is best for that. On Friday's show, we played a report from 2016 and a podcast interview from just September of a Princeton computer science professor going over all the problems with touch screen voting systems. I don't know his politics, but my point of the show was that before the election, the left was very concerned about voter fraud. We talked about a Wall Street Journal article in 2019 about software and other parts of voting machines that are made by Chinese and Russian companies. And the thought was, this is the Wall Street Journal, that the Russian government would somehow sabotage the election for Trump. And now after the election, all that talk's gone. No fraud here, impossible. How dare you even suggest such a thing? So if I come here on the TV and I say, hey, you know, maybe this electronic voting isn't such a great idea. Maybe there's at least a higher potential for funny business going on. And this last election, if you look at these data scientists who say that there's some really odd data irregularities here, I think we should go back and count the votes properly. Oh, you're destroying democracy. You're dangerous. Just admit it. You're stealing the election. It's a coup. When are you just going to say that Biden's president, you bigot, you racist, you, and on and on. It's like, whoa, this is your guys' talking point. Don't forget that. 67% of Democrats, this is a poll in 2018, 67% of Democrats believed, and I'm sure still believe, that Russia changed the vote tally in the 2016 election to elect Trump. And Democrats, here's what's wild about the fact that 67% of Democrats think that. The Democrats and the media, they never made that claim. All they said was Russia hacked the election. And people's minds just went off and made a movie on their own about Russia changing the vote tally. But that's not, no one even made that claim, really. Yet still, 67% of Democrats believe that's what happened. And now all of a sudden, funny business going on in Philadelphia is a bridge too far. How dare you? Okay, so I'm gonna play some videos here. This is not from some right-wing group here. NBC News did a report on this hacking conference in Las Vegas. And this is a conference where companies go and they bring their different products and they see if the hackers can break into them, and then they do that so they can learn how to make their products better, right? So in Las Vegas, they had this game where they gave all these hackers voting machines, right? So they brought these voting machines in for the hackers for the very first time, right? The hackers have never seen these machines before, to see if they could hack into them. So here's NBC News. NBC News, the headline is, or the description is, NBC News' technology correspondent, Jacob Ward, gives an inside look into how hackers can target voting systems with ease. Here it is.
What was really alarming was when you see these hackers, and these are people who've never seen these machines before, have had no practice on them for the most part, come in and engage them, they immediately get into the guts of them. Beyond that, we were seeing Dominion's image cast system. It's a line of tabulators that paper ballots are fed into. That had its guts all over the room. It was not clear to us whether this was the most recent version of the image cast hardware, but it's important to note that Georgia just spent over is about to spend over $100 million on a contract with Dominion to provide image cast hardware to the state in time for the next primaries and for the 2020 election. And yet here these kids were who had opened it up. They said, look, you can pop the front off of it, and here's a port you can get into right here. That's easy. You know, all kinds of stuff that you could certainly do within 6 minutes behind a curtain, much less if you had extra time because any of these were connected to the web, as we discovered a couple of days before, so many of them are.
far-right conspiracy news, and NBC. August 12th, 2019. It's amazing. This is not, like, what are we doing here? This is amazing. This isn't me, right? This isn't me making this up. This isn't some right-wing stuff. These are computer scientists. These are technology people. These are the hackers themselves. These have been, for years, progressives worried about Russia hacking the election for Trump. And now it's impossible. You're just a crazy conspiracy theorist. All right, so that was NBC News. Let's go even further left. This is PBS from way back, October 26th of this year. This was, what, a week before the election? PBS NewsHour, 1 week before the election. They had a 7-minute segment. I got a couple clips here.
So naturally, the political world is nervously watching what voters here will do, while in the world of computer science, they are tensely tracking what the voting machines will do.
Georgia's kind of a petri dish.
Alex Halderman is a professor of computer science at the University of Michigan.
There's a lot more we have to learn about Georgia's election system, and that's going to help inform how to better secure elections, not just in Georgia in November, but across the country for years to come.
He's among a handful of independent election security experts getting unprecedented access to the inner workings of the state's $107 million voting system rolled out earlier this year. Also taking a deep dive, election security white hat hacker Hari Hursty.
They have set up a complicated system which is centralized and doesn't seem to have any safeguards.
That's nice. The title of this segment is, Will Georgia's new voting machines solve election problems or make them worse? PBS 1 week before the election. That last guy at the end, they called him a white hat hacker. So that's an ethical hacker, right? So it's one who, again, is one of the good guys. And he said they created a centralized system that doesn't seem to have any safeguards. Oh, Slater, you're such a conspiracy theorist. This is PBS. So in Georgia, it's this crazy complicated system. They have iPads and laptops and magnetic cards and touchscreens and printers and scanners. It's classic government, like way unnecessarily complicated. Here's a little more.
In 2019, Georgia bought the devices from a Canadian company called Dominion Voting Systems. They replaced paperless machines like these, made by a now defunct company called Diebold Election Systems. A federal judge forced the state to scrap the discredited devices.
So inept. Right? It's just the whole thing is so ridiculously inept. All right, so here's how this works. It's called a BMD, the current system they have right now. BMD, it's a ballot marking device. So there's this whole process beforehand, and then you put in your code, and the screen pops up, and you press on the screen, like your selections, right? Who you vote for, Donald Trump, and then all the down races, right? And then that machine prints out a marked ballot, right? So you get a piece of paper, and then you scan the ballot. I don't know why you just can't. I mean, even in California, you just have your ballot and you fill it out and then you scan it, right? I don't know why you have to have that part in the beginning. Now, it seems foolproof, but if you remember the Princeton computer science professor that we played clips of on Friday, he said only 7, and they say it in this report too, only 7% of people check their ballot that prints out to make sure it matches what they typed into the computer. Only 7% of people. That's it. The rest just go with it. So they don't even check it. But even that isn't enough, because check this out.
When done, the voter prints a ballot. Selections are recorded in human-readable text and in a QR code, which is read and counted by an optical scanner. But election security experts working for the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the state have uncovered several troubling issues. Alex Halderman looked closely at the QR codes, where the votes are encoded for the scanner.
By analyzing the structure of the QR codes, I've been able to learn that there's nothing that stops an attacker from just duplicating one. And the duplicate would count the same as the original barcode.
That's nice. That's great. So easily corruptible. And remember, we're dealing with Hitler here, right? To the left, we are getting rid of Hitler. That's what's at stake here. This isn't just you kind of win an election here or there, because maybe it's not worth it then. But if you're going to get rid of Hitler out of the White House, and what do I got to do to get rid of Hitler? What do I got to do? Right, to actually get rid of Hitler, if you like, who am I thinking of? Bonhoeffer, right? Like Bonhoeffer, and there are all these like plots to kill Hitler and like put a bomb in a suitcase and somehow get near Hitler and leave it under the table and try to kill him then, right? They're like, you have to kill. Here, what do I got to do? I got to change a few QR codes. I got to print out a couple extra QR codes. I got to type in a little on some computer software and change. That's it? Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Anyone can justify doing that to get rid of Hitler, which is what the left thinks they're actually doing. All right, it gets worse. Let me take a break here. We'll come back. I promise, like, you're not going to believe it. Listen, in my year of doing this TV show, have I ever done this tease? Have I ever said, you're not going to believe what we have next? I've never done that. But I'm telling you, it gets worse than what we've shared so far. All right, today, everyone's getting all excited on the stock market because we got news of a new vaccine from Moderna. And we'll talk about them coming up with Vincent Racaniello, our virology professor. And it's great. Like, I'm very happy that my stocks are happy, right? But the stock market's very emotional, right? Because then reality hits that, oh, we got to actually make this vaccine. Oh, we got to actually get it to people. Oh, people actually have to take it. Right? There's massive logistical hurdles that, like, people don't realize right away. Then we have the real economic realities of the economy. Gold is tied to the value of the dollar. Trillions of dollars of spending that we haven't paid any attention to whatsoever. Just like, oh, here's a $3 trillion bill. I just saw, oh yeah, sign that. And everyone's like, oh, it's amazing. Like the media and everyone, and it was bipartisan. Like, oh, we need this new $3 trillion bill. Amazing. And on top of that, printing trillions of dollars. It's insane. Then the other problem is, who's going to be the president next month? No one knows. No one knows. And gold is connected to the instability of the world. And this is a kind of a big one. Who's going to be the leader of the free world in a few weeks? Are you certain that that's going to go well still? Patriot Gold Group. Give them a call. Any questions you have, they've never been busier, but a real person is going to pick up the phone. A+ Better Business Bureau, 4 years in a row. Consumer Affairs, 5-star, #1 gold IRA dealer. So you can get all hopped up on the emotions of the stock market. That's fine if you want to play that game. I'm in it for, well, I look at reality, and I'm in it for the medium to long term. And I think there are some real underlying problems with our economy, and that's why I bought gold and silver. Patriot Gold Group. You can give a call, 1-800-798-4260, 1-800-798-4260. And while everyone's getting all hyped up on the emotions of the stock market, you're playing, I think, the real game. 1-800-798-4260, patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I'm talking about these election machines in Georgia, and I can't pin down how many other states use them. I think Pennsylvania does, but it's only it's like 50 of the 67 counties in Pennsylvania, so it's not all states are the same. We got to figure all that out exactly who's doing this. But we know Georgia is, and that's what I want to focus on here. So there was a lawsuit in Georgia, a federal lawsuit, about these election machines from their debut in the June primary, where tons of problems. The iPads they were using took 30 hours to download the voter database. They would often display the wrong races. They would randomly shut down. The machines would blow the circuit breakers in the polling locations. None of the poll workers knew how to fix anything. It was just total chaos back in June. So one of the things they did in response in Georgia was to have a technician at every polling location, right? A technician on standby ready to fix it if anything goes broken. And you are supposed to believe that no technician could ever, would ever do anything in any way to change or alter the results of that precinct. That would never happen. It is impossible. It's unconscionable. You're a bigot, a racist, a sexist, a tyrant for even suggesting that such a thing could be possible. Except, here's PBS interviewing a computer scientist at the University of Michigan. Again, this is October 26th, 2020. This is a week before the election. Here it is.
And in late September, another concern came to light. During testing, election workers found half the names of the 21 candidates for Senate intermittently disappeared from screens during the review phase. Dominion sent out a last-minute software patch.
I'm worried that the Georgia system is the technical equivalent to the 737 MAX. They've just made a last-minute software change that might well have unintended consequences and cause even more severe problems on election day.
You never want to rush something which is mission critical, and this is mission critical, into production without proper time of testing. That's really one of the ways bad actors are finding the vulnerabilities to exploit, is looking for honest vulnerabilities and finding out if they can be weaponized, if they can be exploited.
Despite all the concerns, federal judge Amy Totenberg decided to let the election proceed with the ballot marking device system.
No problems. Again, I'll say it again. My point is that these are left-wing groups, left-wing media worried about voter fraud. New York Times in 2012 ran an article, in 2012, error and fraud at issue as absentee voting rises. That was 2012, right? Back then, Georgia had, I think, 80,000 mail-in ballots, 80,000 absentee ballots. This election, there were over 800,000 mail-in, 10x. And almost none of them were rejected. They just let them all through, which hopefully gets turned up in an audit, which we'll get to in just a second here. Okay, we're good with that? We're good with how insane that process is? And listen, we shouldn't stop fighting what happened a couple weeks ago, but must be changed by the next election? Amazing. Okay, let's get some specifics here. There's some details on the ground. So let's go to New Hampshire. So I don't have any updates on presidential recounting of anything, right? But we got some local races, and we can extrapolate from there. So New Hampshire, pretty irrelevant to the outcome of the election, presidential election. But there was a recount for a New Hampshire county legislator, like local assembly seat. Now, I want to say something here. Like, you hear the word recount and audit, and I feel like people in the media are using that interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So a recount is much more basic. A recount is you scanned 100 ballots, and it was 60-40. Okay, let's rescan them again. I mean, it's going to turn out the same, right? It's going to be 60-40 again, right? An audit is when you go ballot by ballot and you say, all right, did this person sign it? Do they have a witness signature? Are they registered to vote? Did they vote twice? Are they dead? Do they live here? Did they move out of state, right? That's an audit. And that's the only way you're really going to make a difference, if you really audit the ballots. So pay attention to those two different words. Those are two different things. Now, I say that, but in New Hampshire, all they did was a recount. Now, one good thing that can come from a simple recount is they notice data entry errors. So this is from the local New Hampshire newspaper. Another common error is data entry, which involves an election worker entering a number on the vote total summary sheet that doesn't match the number that should have been reported. So basic human data entry error. That's what appears to have happened in Merrimack in Executive Council District number 5. All right? So they recounted that district. The Democrats ended up getting 380 new votes on the recount, and the Republican candidate got 1,600 more votes. There was I got some other seats here in New Hampshire. It was a total mess. Guys, do we have this document here? So this is hard to decipher here. So the top row are candidates, and there's like a weird thing in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's a weird state where like they vote for like the top few. You don't just get one vote, you vote for a couple different candidates. Anyway, the top row are Republicans, the bottom row are Democrats. The black is the original vote, the red is the recount. Right? So let's just go far upper right-hand corner, you see McMahon, right? So originally he got 5,256 votes, and then in the recount, 5,554 votes. That's a 298 vote increase, right? That's a 5.6% jump. He added 5.6%. And you go across the bottom, you see another candidate, 297 vote increase, 299 vote increase, 303 vote increase, right? So that's a 6.3% increase, a 5.6% increase, right? Now you look at the Democrats on the bottom. On their recount, they got 21 vote increase, 28, 18. One candidate lost 99 votes on the recount. So while the Republicans were gaining about 5 to 6 percentage points on their vote on the recount, the Democrats were all less than 1% increase, and one of them lost 2.2% of their vote. That was just with a flat, basic recount. But you hear again from the media, oh, there's no evidence, it's impossible, nothing. That's just like a data entry error. Now imagine 5 million votes in Georgia. No, impossible, nothing could ever go wrong. Connecticut, a state assembly seat, had a recount. The Republican, we got the headline here, the Republican was down 80 votes, and now they're up 21. Whoops. Michigan Democrat, first one with 50.08% of the vote, and due to a glitch, and we have the Detroit newspaper here, due to a glitch, ended up losing with only 48.2% of the vote. But again, nothing could ever go wrong with 5 million votes, or in Pennsylvania, like 9 million, whatever, it's 10 million votes. Nothing could ever go wrong in that process. Here's the latest out of Georgia. So Doug Collins, so there's 2 Senate races in Georgia. There were 2 Senate races. There are still, but 2 Senate races. And one was a Democrat versus a Republican, and then one was 2 Republicans and a Democrat. Doug Collins was the Republican in that race who got the lowest votes. So he's out. He's not in the runoff anymore, right? So that's Doug Collins. He is a congressman currently. He and the head of the Georgia Republican Party, they both wrote a letter to the Secretary of State of Georgia saying that this recount process is not sufficient because apparently the recount does not include a review of the signatures on the absentee ballots, right? So they're not going to compare the signatures on the absentee ballot and the signature on the absentee ballot application to confirm that they're the same, which is something I feel like you would need to do. Check this fact out. In 2018, 3.5% of absentee ballots were rejected in Georgia. 3.5. In 2020, 0.3. And there were 10x more ballots. You would think the rejection rate would be, if normally it's 3.5, you would think it would be like 5 or 6% because there were so many more ballots, first-time voters. But no, it's 0.3. And I don't know if in Georgia they're ever gonna have any sort of process that rejects those ballots if they're not checking the signatures. Second problem, in Georgia, there are these giant rooms, they're in like a convention center. And they have tables with teams of two election workers, and they're the ones who are recounting the ballot by hand. But the state, I don't know who decides this, but there can only be 1 Republican and 1 Democrat poll watcher, or I guess not a poll watcher, like recount observer, monitor. One Republican, 1 Democrat for every 10 tables of people reviewing the votes. So 1 Republican, 1 Democrat for every 10 tables, 10 pairs. That's impossible to review properly. Why would you not just have, why would the whoever's doing this in Georgia just be like, yeah, you want, how many Republicans, how many people do you want at every table? You want 10 people per table to watch? Great. Why not? Why would you not do it that way? Instead, you limit it to 1 per 10 tables. So this is a video out of Cobb County. This is one of the trouble counties in Georgia. And you can see here the tables, and you can see 2 people per table. and then a couple people randomly walking about monitoring, but you can't really see what they're doing. Now, the thing that gets me about this video is, see that table on the left? There's just like random boxes, like random unmarked boxes for like mailboxes. And you're like, what is that? Does that look organized and orderly to you? It's like a giant mess to me. I feel like we're doing this like a third world country. In France, again, I can't believe we're talking about how France, paper ballots on election day, you put it in a transparent box. They count the votes right there in front of everyone after the polls close. Right here, we open the box, we count the votes. Done. That's it. Why don't we do it that way? Nope. But we're supposed to believe, no, nothing, no fraud could ever. How dare you? How dare you even mention these concerns, these accusations of voter fraud that PBS made a couple weeks ago? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk to our virology professor about the latest vaccine from Moderna that was announced this morning. But right now, I want to go to Professor David Azarad, professor at Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. Professor, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Nice to see you, Mike.
Nice to see you. So Ibram Kendry, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, he wrote this tweet the other day. The term legal vote is as fictionally fraught and functionally racist as the terms illegal alien, race-neutral, welfare queen, handout, super predator, crack baby, personal responsibility, that's my favorite, and post-racial. Listen, maybe if you want, you can comment on the details of that, but progressives control language and conservatives just go along with it all the time. What do we do about this?
Yeah, I mean, that's not progressive. I mean, that's the left, meaning, you know, I don't want to start splitting hairs, but the progressives are, to me, has more moderate connotations than the left. Here we're dealing with the left. And I mean, this is their basic game this day. And, you know, Kendi is emblematic of this, is you just call everyone and anything a racist or racism so as to silence people. And because this is the central piety of our regime, because America's unofficial state religion is anti-racism, it's the equivalent of, you know, accusing someone in the Middle Ages of being a heretic or an unbeliever today in the Muslim world. That's the central piety of the regime, and it's used to silence people and to instill fear in them. And my question is, why do conservatives go along with it? I can understand why the left would do it. It's a very powerful tool to impose your views on others. What I want to know is, why are conservatives so afraid of being called racist under such bogus terms, right? I don't mean real, malevolent, biological belief in superior races. I mean this kind of crap. That's the issue. It really takes two to tango. It takes one side to hurl the accusation, but the other side to fold like a lawn chair. And so, you know, the left does what it always does. What I want to know, and I know you're the one asking the questions, not me, but why does the right go along with this? And the answer is because they're afraid, because they're cowardly, because they ultimately subscribe to the left's moral framework that they really do think that racism is the worst possible thing in 2020 in America. Okay, we're not talking about 1857. We're not talking about Jim Crow or slavery. We're talking about America in 2020. You really, really think that racism is the issue of the traditional variety? I mean, come on.
Yeah. So you speak of we're afraid, and I agree. Let me give you one example of something to be afraid of, and then we'll go deeper. You're afraid of losing your job, right? We were talking on the radio show, we talked about this law professor at University of Miami who made some comment, I don't even know, whatever. And he didn't back down, and he got fired. Right? All these other people, all these other professors, oh, I'm so sorry and whatever. But this guy ended up getting fired. So is it worth taking a stand, Professor, for the truth and losing your job over?
That's an excellent point. So allow me to clarify and draw two distinctions.
Yes.
One is for most people who are at the mercy of their employers, or who live in a community where their views are in a minority and they don't want to become pariahs or social lepers. I'm not, it's one thing I'm not demanding that everyone call out the lies. You could just keep quiet and not reaffirm them and pile on. So I don't expect everyone to be a martyr. I think that would be a foolish counsel. But I think it is reasonable to say some people can just keep quiet. My criticism, though, is not leveled at ordinary people who are at the mercy of their employers. It's leveled at the powerful conservative organizations or the powerful members of the Republican establishment who have much deeper pockets, who have donors who actually might back them, and who are cowardly. We do not have enough people like Donald Trump or like Tucker Carlson are really the two that come to mind, who refuse to bend the knee. So mine is not a counsel that, I don't think there's any good from being martyred in this day and age for an ordinary citizen. Because people will talk about it on Twitter for 5 minutes and then everyone will forget, and then you've lost your job and your name is forever besmirched on the internet. But there is a need for the leaders in the movement and the party who have more stability and more security to denounce these lies.
Yeah, and help people not even be in that position in the first place by changing the culture around it. So what does courage look like? What are you looking for exactly?
Courage would be, in this case, it's not about risking your life. It is about risking your reputation and maybe some of your livelihood. Like in the case of Tucker Carlson, the advertisers have been fleeing his show. But it's about developing the ability to call out lies and to not apologize when the subsequent lies that you're a racist are hurled at you. So they claim that there's racism everywhere today. That's a lie. If you denounce it, you get called a racist. And, I come back to Tucker Carlson and to Trump just because they've provided time and time again the example of prominent Americans who were accused and, they tried to cancel them and they refused to go along with it. And you know what? They weathered the storm and they moved on. So I think there's a lesson there for other leaders on the right to do not play by the rules set by the left. You will never win by that. Do not try to curry favor with them because they don't have good intentions. The game is rigged. They will always redefine racism so as to ensure that America remains just as racist that it's always been. We will never outflank the left in trying to claim, well, actually, Democrats are the real racists. We just need to reject the premise that eliminating white racism is the central priority in America in 2020. That's what I want to emphasize. We're not having a debate about the past. It is undeniable that America was racist in the past. The issue is today, is this the central force in American politics, as the left claims? The answer has to be an emphatic no.
Yep. Professor, I got 30 seconds. I'm going to put you in an unfair position. You hear from Kamala Harris and others that we are racist because certain people, black people, don't start from the same place that I, Mike Slater, white middle-class guy, started from. Therefore, America's racist, still racist. We're unequal in where we begin. And I'm sure you've seen lots of memes and graphics of like the people standing over the fence on boxes, looking the baseball game and whatever. We're not equal, right, at our starting point. What's your response to that?
Well, that's undeniably true, but that's not evidence of racism. You're not equal than me, maybe because your parents set up a trust fund for you, or maybe someone else, had the misfortune of growing up in a broken home. The promise of America is not that we're all going to start off in life with the same assets and opportunities. The promise of America is that our rights would be equally secured under the law, and that the government would treat all people impartially. That's the promise. There is no evidence that the government is not doing that today, at least in the way that the left claims. And therefore, I would want to help my fellow Black American citizens who have fewer opportunities, but the fact that they do is not evidence of racism.
Yep, that's it. Professor, always good to talk to you. Professor David Azarad, Hillsdale College in D.C. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Love it. Let's not back down. Come on, conservative. Coming up next, Professor Racaniello from Columbia University. We'll talk about the latest COVID vaccine. It's Mike Slater, True Story, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, listen, we have some great news to celebrate with these vaccines here. So I can't wait, again, all weekend, can't wait to talk to our professor of virology at Columbia University, Professor Vincent Racaniello, and you have to watch and listen to his podcast, This Week in Virology, and you can do that, of course, at microbe.tv. Professor, wonderful news here. So let's talk about the latest. This morning, Moderna, what'd they say, 95% effective? What do we know about the Moderna vaccine?
Yeah, 7 a.m. Eastern time, they released a press release, 94.5% efficacy. And this is based on 95 cases, and they're split between vaccine and placebo. They observed 90 cases in the placebo group and only 5 in the vaccine group. So that gives you the 94.5% efficacy. And this is in a study of 30,000 people where half got the vaccine and half got the placebo. So this is good for a number of reasons. First, we need more than one vaccine. Remember last week we had the Pfizer vaccine, right? But they can only make 25 million doses this year. And so we have another company, but even more, this is the same kind of vaccine as Pfizer. It's an mRNA vaccine. And to show you get high efficacy by a different company's vaccine means it's probably working pretty well. And that's good news.
Why? Okay, so are they similar? You mentioned they're both mRNA. Can you give us the science behind that? And how similar are they, the vaccines?
So an mRNA, in our cells, we have lots of proteins. The proteins are made by a blueprint in our DNA, right? And the DNA is copied to make mRNA. These are RNA molecules that are then translated to make protein. So the mRNA is the direct precursor of proteins in our cells. And so what they have done for both vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, they have made an mRNA that codes for the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. And then this is wrapped in what's called a nanoparticle. It's made of lipids, fats, basically, and then it's injected into your muscle. And so the mRNA gets into your cells, and the nanoparticle helps the mRNA get into cells. And then your cells make the protein. And because it's foreign, it's not an us protein, right? It's a foreign protein. We immediately make an immune response against it. We make antibodies and T cells. And as we have seen in these vaccines, they protect us. Now, you say, how are they different? Apparently, the main difference, so the mRNA is the same. It's coding for the same spike protein. But the main difference is probably the nanoparticle composition, and Pfizer has been mum about that, so we don't know the details. So we assume that there are differences between the Pfizer and the Moderna because, intellectual property is what it's all about in companies. So they must be different in order for them to be both making a product. And I would guess it's in the lipid composition where it's different.
Would you say that's a dramatic difference or just an insignificant difference?
I would say it's enough so that the patent people would say, okay, you can make this and not infringe on the other companies. Whether it's biologically significant or not, it's unclear. They both have efficacies in the high 90s.
Yeah.
So,
which is remarkable. So what? Do these companies do they talk to each other in this whole process? Or was it like a real race to see who can do this first, which is like a dramatic story?
Well, typically companies don't talk to each other. they keep everything secret. They don't want anyone else to know so that they can do it first, because they have to make a profit in order for a product to go forward. I think that back in January, when the genome sequence of the virus was first published, I think both companies sat down and said, let's do something. And Moderna had been working on mRNA vaccines for a while. So I think on their own, they decided we're going to make a spike-based mRNA vaccine. And Pfizer, as far as I know, doesn't have a history in mRNA vaccines. They might, but they might have kept it secret. And then, a couple of months later, they suddenly said, we're making this mRNA vaccine, which to me sounded strange because they'd never made one before. So I suspect they didn't talk to each other. Now, people will tell you that there's been a lot of collaboration in this pandemic, and that's the way it should be, right? People's lives should be first and not profits. But I'm not sure if these two companies have been speaking all that much, except through press releases, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. I would love to read a book one day about the behind the scenes and the competition and do you know some of these scientists? They must be working just tirelessly. I mean, I'm sure these people have been working 20-hour days for 8 months to try to make this happen. And do you know anything about that?
No, I think that's a great book. I'm sure someone will write it. After this is all over and we're back to somewhat normal, someone will write it, and it will be interesting. Sure, I know some of the scientists involved, and I'm sure they're working really hard to do this, because this is amazing. I just want to emphasize this again.
Yes.
Right? It took 50 years to make a polio vaccine, which was released in 1955. Now, granted, the tech is a lot better nowadays, but this is about a year since they started. And that is just amazing. And that's because the science has advanced in these years. It's just remarkable.
Yeah. So and go back months ago, there was a chance there would be no vaccine, right? Was that a possibility, or did you think we'd find something eventually?
Well, there was a chance that it would take a lot longer, right? Okay, the first try doesn't work. Let's go back to the drawing board and try something else. I mean, that's what happened with the polio vaccine. It took them a lot of tries to get it right. And what's amazing here is not only the speed, but that they got it right, at least in these two cases, right? It seems to be working well.
It seems like the first two real trials worked. Wow, that's amazing. We have a logistics friend who's really good with all this stuff, but what do you know about the cold? Do these need to be transported in the cold?
So that's a really important question. And in the beginning, both companies said these vaccines have to be kept really, really cold. So just to give an example, your freezer is around 0 degrees, right? It's frozen. But these are way below 0 in what they have to be kept. They use special freezers that most people don't have. So
how cold? How cold? 10 below 0 or 100 below 0?
Minus 70 Celsius. Okay, you have to convert that because I'm a Celsius guy.
Okay, all right. Negative 70. Let me get. Yeah, so negative 94 Fahrenheit. Wow.
There you go. So that's really cold. I have those freezers in my lab, but doctors' offices don't. But now they're saying that they might not have to be kept so cold, which is better. So we'll see if that's true or not. I think Moderna said this morning that they don't need to keep it at minus 70, and Pfizer's been hinting at the same thing. So that would be good, because that would be a problem. Now, the only issue is, remember, if you don't keep it cold enough, the vaccine will degrade, and then it doesn't become potent. So you could end up immunizing people and they're not protected. So you got to be really careful about that.
Wow. Right. So one breakdown in the supply chain, right? It could be anywhere in it. It could be one of the trucks. It could be what it's packaged in. It could be at the CVS or wherever they don't keep it cold enough and it doesn't work. Wow. Tricky.
Absolutely. Yep.
Do you know how they literally manufacture these things? Do you have any idea what that looks like? Yep.
I do. It's amazing. So there are two ways that you could do this. You could do chemistry and synthesize the mRNA, okay? But that's not how they did it. They did it using a different virus. So they take DNA, which codes for this spike protein, right? And then they add to it an enzyme that will make RNA in a test tube. And the enzyme comes from a different virus that we all use in the laboratory. And they do these reactions at huge scale. I mean, they're making kilograms of mRNA. And just to put this in perspective, when I work with RNA in the lab, I think a millionth of a gram is a lot of RNA. Right? And they're making kilos. It's unbelievable.
What?
And that's why that this first year they can only make about 20, 25 million doses each, right? Because it's hard.
So so what's the limiting factor of making more doses?
So one of the limiting factors is doing enough of these reactions to get scale up, right? But the other is you have to show when you make something that it's pure. So you have to subject it to a lot of chemistry tests and say there's nothing else in it but this mRNA. And you have to have a process, test that process, and just use that process and not make any changes to it. Otherwise, you have to do it all over again. So initially, for the first batches, that's why it's hard. Next year, they should be able to make 500 million to 1 billion doses each, and that'll be fine. But this year, it's going to be really limiting.
That seems impossible, what you just described. So and I'm imagining like, so you have your test tube, right, with your millionth of a whatever. And I'm thinking like a comically large test tube at like this big warehouse. Like, do you even know what like the equipment looks like to pull off like kilograms of RNA?
So I can tell you that when we grow viruses in the lab, we grow them in tiny plastic containers. But in companies, when they make millions of doses of a vaccine, they have huge tanks with 100,000 liters of liquid in them. They scale up in ways that we don't even get close to in a lab. And so it's the same thing with this reaction. We take it in a tiny tube. I have to bring one of these tubes sometime and show you what it looks like. Yes. And then in the company, they have to either do a lot of tiny tubes or use really big tubes, as you say. And I'm not sure how they're doing it. They're keeping that secret. But the scale up is remarkable. That's a science in itself, because it's not always the case that if you do something in a small volume and you just multiply it by 1 million, that it's going to work. Might not.
Wow, is that right? Is that right? So you can't just 10x it or 1,000x it and it's the same necessarily?
Nope, not necessarily.
Wow. I've noticed that when I make cookies, Professor, that if I double the recipe, it's never always the same. And now I can blame it on the chemistry of it. One of my favorite shows is the hypnotically transfixing how it's made. You know, where they're like, here's how you make screws. And here's how you make like pasta or whatever. I would love to see the episode of here's how you make the vaccine. Professor, we got to run, but we have tons to talk about still. Let's do it again next week. Is that all right?
All right. We'll see you next week.
In the meantime, everyone go to microbe.tv and you can watch the professor's podcast, and it's great. And he's literally the one person I trust in this whole process. That's it. We'll do it tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.